I've been all around college for 12 years and getting the opportunity to come back to Tennessee and coach, went through some things, and then to get a breath of fresh air in the National Football League with the Ravens organization, John Harbaugh. I'm learning so much, growing so much as a coach.
Good afternoon, everybody. That was T. Martin. T. Martin, as last year, talking about being a coach, going to the NFL and coaching in the pros for John Harbaugh, thanks to the Knox News for that audio of T. Martin. We're going to be talking about Coach Martin coming up in this broadcast today, as always, on a Wednesday after the football season. We talk with former Wolverine Jim Scarcelli, who is with us right now. Scar, how are you?
Hey, I'm great, Danny. It's made it up to the gym, and what are you going to do on a day like this? So took care of that, and talking about recruiting. I shared this in the past. I remember a coach asking, about a kid. Is he the kind of kid that will go to an 8 o'clock class a mile away? When you got a foot of snow on the ground. And that was a question a college coach asked me about one of my players. It was a great question. And how, you want to be able to answer that honestly. But yeah, we are getting the snow here in Michigan. And the Wolverines we used to call it the vicious triangle from South Quad to campus. And then we just called it the building. Back in the day, they call it the Schembeckler now, I guess. We just called it the building back in the day, but that was the vicious triangle that you did all day, all year long as a football player. But we got Michigan, Purdue tomorrow night, and but yeah, things are good, Danny. A couple things happening with the football team we'll get into.
Yeah, we will get into a couple. This is what we talk about 99% of the time is the football team, specifically Michigan. But when you mentioned that snow and that you've already been out to work out, I thought you'd go after the show. I'm not surprised. I was going to ask you if you had braved the weather, but since you've said that you've already done it, what would it take, you Scar? How much snow would have to be out there for you to look out and say, and I'm just going to kick my feet up and I'm not going to go work out today. I'm just going to stay home.
Danny, I'm going to find a way to get it done, man. That's just, we're going to I'll go in the basement. I'll do push-ups. I'm going to find a way. That's just how I'm wired. That's how, I don't know. That's just how I always been, man. No excuses. Got to find a way to get it done. That's how I coached. That's how I was coached. And, that's just how you're wired if you want to succeed in anything.
Yeah, get it in. Get it done.
Get it done, man.
I hear people at the gym say, they'll see somebody else and they'll say, got to get it in no matter what. So, yeah, there you go. That's not a surprise.
No excuses, man. It's just part of what you do.
I thought maybe that you'd go downstairs and have your home gym and, you like getting out and, going to a gym, but then you'd also have a gym at your house. So it'd be pretty easy. Just, go downstairs. Screw it. You can get it done there. What about when you were if you were, coached high school for 25 years, well, there weren't as many snow days back when you started, and then at the end there were probably a lot more now. Like you get a little bit of dusting and they're closing everything down.
Yeah, like I said, I taught phys ed, so I was able to work out with my students, and yeah, it just seemed now. But one of the good things with technology though is like in my area they canceled school. And in some of these areas, and they're just going online. It's all online classes. So it isn't really a straight blow-off day like it used to be. So at least they're getting something done on a day like today. Hey, Scar, welcome. Let's get some of these top recruits go blue. All right. They got them coming in. And hopefully they're closing some deals, man.
Yeah, this weekend, a big weekend. And, of course, February 1st, there's some big names. And then even for next year, that you're already thinking about the possibility of Michigan lining those up. But a big part of that could be with this opening that Michigan has on their coaching staff. When you think about recruiting and the job opening, they have a quarterback coaching position open and potentially a play calling position as well, as Matt Weiss was both the quarterback coach and the co-offensive coordinator. I talked about this a little bit yesterday. It is the hot topic for Michigan. Scar, somebody that played at Michigan, understands how this all works and coaching and everything else. What do you think is top of mind for Jim Harbaugh now that he has this opening and that he can fill it? What's he thinking about here?
You know what, Denny, being a head football coach, again, I was only at the high school level, but it's really no different than any kind of business. Anybody that leads a business, leads a school, leads anything. It's all the same stuff. So number one, you got to bring a guy in that, he's going to fit in with your culture. He's going to fit in with everybody. He's a team guy. And I know that's what Jim's going to want, a guy that is just egoless, fit in, get along with everybody. But I know that Jim thinks that, listen, you got to do two things, man. You better be a great recruiter, and you better be able to coach, teach. You better be a great teacher. There's no way around that in college football. I think really, really, Denny, in anything. I ran a business for many years too. It's all the same stuff. I don't care if you're running a restaurant. You gotta the same stuff. You gotta have people want to work for you, work with you, but. Anyway, we heard the name Brian Griese. It's interesting how Brian Griese attacked Jim just 3 years ago. He was fire him, get rid of him. And I'll give Brian Griese, I was upset with that. I'm going to be honest, as a former player, I was upset that I wish some of that stuff would have stayed in-house. But he had such a high-profile position that I didn't think he was helping recruiting at all. When you're talking the way he was. Anyway, I'll give the guy credit. He's got San Francisco. He's the quarterback coach. They've had 3 quarterbacks this year, and they're playing in the NFC Championship game. So I'll give Brian Griese credit, their organization credit for bringing 3 guys in that could play. But you got to give Brian Griese some credit for that. But I know Jim has talked to him. He's never coached college football, but, he has a name. People know it. He would probably be a guy that could, he could coach. And he can talk to kids. Denard Robinson is sitting there right there too, Denny. I don't know if you talked about him yesterday.
No, I did not.
Well, Denard is, he's one of them analysts that I don't know that he's ever had a other position with any other colleges, but Denard is there. Denard can go in and he can coach, he can recruit. So, he's going to have options. And this, Denny, this guy, whoever it is, they'll be part of the collaboration. It's not going to be, this person would have to understand that, you're going to be part of the Harbaugh, Moore and collaboration, however they figure that thing out. But Denard, Griese, those are the only 2 names I heard. Now you heard some other names.
Yeah, I didn't think of Denard. Obviously played the position, young guy. And when you think about the recruiting piece of it, I think everybody would think everybody loves Denard Robinson. The guy, the way that he played, he was an outstanding player, but he played with a flair. Everybody everybody was a Denard Robinson fan. And then afterwards, he's got the $1 million smile. And then he gave the speech at the Big Ten luncheon where he got up there in front of everybody else and, looked in the camera and put his heart out on the line, man. He would be great. I wonder, you were talking about all that. If Denard Robinson went out, I would think that Denard Robinson would be a great recruiter. But it's like if you put Denard Robinson in sales, you'd say, well, what kind of salesman is? It'd probably be really good. I wonder the thing about Griese, and I disagree with you. I thought it took a lot of guts as a former player to go out there and say, hey, enough is enough. There are a lot of people that thought enough was enough. And it didn't matter what you were saying behind the scenes. People were ready to move on. It had been 6 years, but that, I don't want to take it down that road. I just, there's, different opinions and about different things.
Again, I'm gonna just real quick. I know we don't want to beat that up, but okay. I always felt that we got so many Michigan guys in the media. We got Desmond and we had Griese. And from day one, you had Paul Feinbaum and some of the big national people really getting after Jim hard early on in his career, in his years at Michigan. And I was just a little frustrated that Michigan guys didn't step up early on before he went, 0-5 against Ohio State. So I get it later on after he was already, getting whooped around a little bit and we hadn't done anything against Ohio State and struggled against Michigan State. I get it later on. but I was upset that early on, Michigan guys in the media did not get after Paul Feinbaum and at least try to defend our coach a little bit. Just being honest, that's my thought on it.
Yeah, and my thought is that, like, you're in the media, you're not out there with your pom-poms and your degree and let's all, bleed maize and blue, and that's what it's all about. You're not a cheerleader for Michigan. Like, when you're out there, you're trying to appeal not just to Michigan fans, to everybody. Paul Feinbaum, he's trying to fire everybody up. And when you push a button and it works, like, Paul Feinbaum, if nobody would really get all upset when he talked about Michigan, slammed Michigan or slammed Harbaugh or anything else, he wouldn't talk about Harbaugh. But boy, when you're in the media and you talk about something and it ignites everybody and they tell you how much they hate you and they're sending you all this mail and everything, that's all you're going to talk about. That's all anybody was talking about. So it's not the job. And look, Desmond Howard's been carrying Michigan's water every single time he opens up the mic. So, like, right from the start, he always has his pom-poms. Charles Woodson's my favorite Wolverine of all time. He runs around with a flag on TV. Those guys are total homers for Michigan. I don't like that myself. I'd rather have somebody give me an honest opinion. You could say you love Michigan. You went to Michigan. You hope they win. But I would like an honest opinion of what you think of it. And Griese, 75% of Michigan fans and former Michigan players were ready to move on. That's all right. It's nothing against Jim. Like, you'd have to tell Jim, like, hey, Jim, you had a longer leash than anybody in the history would have gotten, and you just didn't get it done. It's time to move on. And, they didn't, and it worked out, which is great for Michigan. But, like, you were in there was just a small minority of people that were standing around thinking, oh, I'm going to stay with Harbaugh. And I think, the people that did were really just like, would never entertain anything of moving on from anybody. I mean, what would you say if Jim would have been there for 10 years and never beat Ohio State? It's like, let's just, stick it out with Harbaugh. Like, at some point, Scar, you had to say, well,
no, I understand. Like I said, Danny, I understood later on. I just frustrated with early on.
Okay.
Early on, when he was just getting going there, and he's having the satellite camps, which I think is a great idea. I don't understand why that's not fair. You've got kids from all over the country that want to go on unofficial visits. And some kids, I was a former coach, man. Some kids don't have parents that can drive them all over the country to go on unofficial visits to meet the coaches, and I just thought that was a great idea to give kids the opportunity to meet coaches in different parts of the country. And the NCAA shut it down. And Feinbaum was all over Jim for that. And no one defended him from Michigan. I was pissed off about that because as a coach, I thought it was a great idea, but the NCAA saw it differently. So
yeah, well, the teams that were in the power in the SEC in Alabama, they didn't want anything to do with that. But I disagree with you. I thought everyone had Jim Harbaugh's back on that, not just the Michigan people. Everybody did. The people that didn't were Nick Saban and the other coaches in the South. They didn't want anything to do with Jim Harbaugh and this brash guy coming in from the pros. And, that's why they killed it. But I think everybody stood up. Jim Harbaugh was a grand slam hire. Everybody was like waiting to see what he would do. And so the satellite camps was the very first thing. And everybody was like, oh, okay, this is how Jim Harbaugh is going to roll. And then Jim Harbaugh came back with the signing of the stars. And you wondered, like, all right, he's a great football coach, but how is he really going to, be able to attract top players and get them at Michigan without paying them? Well, he was going to have the satellite camps. He went to the signing with the stars. Everybody was like, Jim Harbaugh is the greatest thing ever. But then he started losing at Ohio State. That wore off after, a few years. Got to beat Ohio State. Let me ask you about Griese, because Griese, he was on, he played in the pros for whatever, 10, 11 years. He then was a college football broadcaster for, I don't know, whatever, another 10 years. And then he went to the Monday Night Football booth, and just 1 year on a football staff, a good one with Kyle Shanahan and what he's doing now with Brock Purdy. But if you're Jim Harbaugh, I think it took a lot to even make the call to say, hey, this was a guy that said enough is enough. But I think he's worth calling here and entertaining as a coach. How would you know if Brian Griese, can you just assume that he's a sharp guy, that he's going to be a great recruiter?
I never met the man. I hear him talk. You hear him as he's a good communicator. He knows football. He's an analyst that Really enjoyed listening to as a quarterback. A lot of times the quarterbacks don't always see, the offensive line and an understanding of defense, defensive line. And I was impressed with him as a analyst, big time. He knew the game. So as far as answering the question, as a recruiter, I believe the guy could recruit. I just hearing him talk, I got to believe his name would help. People know who he is. Parents are going to know who he is. All that name recognition stuff helps. And, and Jim obviously heard the things he said about him, but Jim that's a sign of a good leader, though. He's like, hey, I understand it. You made your point publicly, but I think you can coach and help Michigan win. You were the quarterback on a national championship team, and let's give it a shot. Denny, we got a quick question here. Who would you prefer, T. Martin or Brian Griese? T. Martin he's a proven college coach. He's been all over as a coach. I don't know how many different schools, and he's done a good job. I don't know if he's been a head coach yet, but you gotta take a look at both those guys. What does each of them bring? Jim has brought a bunch of former Michigan guys in here, and that stuff. I'm putting myself in that position as a guy getting recruited. A lot of that matters, man. If you're in there getting recruited by this staff, and you got guys from 30 years of football, the 6-8 different guys from all different eras, some of that matters, and they all keep, selling their love for Michigan. So that's what Griese would be able to sell, his love for Michigan.
Yeah, I agree with you about Harbaugh, putting any axes to grind away and everything else. He also did the same thing with Mike Hart when Harbaugh was at Stanford, said something about, I don't know, Michigan's one of their, I don't know, just the academics or something. I don't remember exactly specifically, but Mike Hart came back at him and was like, basically shut your pie hole kind of thing. And, he's on the staff. So Harbaugh, buried that one to get Mike Hart too. So yeah, that's a good sign, as a coach. And I know a lot of people, especially this week, I've been reading on the Maize and Blue Review. There's all these people people say they might not necessarily like drama. They might not necessarily like gossip. But if you're a big time Michigan fan, people do like to, they like to hear what people are saying about the dynamics between the coaches and the AD and the president and the regents and the former players and what everybody's saying and who's stirring the pot and all these kind of things. And I do know that I don't know, probably 7 years ago, I was out at, I was watching a basketball game. It was a former Michigan staffer was at the table that I was at. We were there for about an hour. And at the one point, there was something about, Harbaugh or something. And he gave his opinion. He said, Harbaugh, what people don't know about him is he's just straight up about trying to win football games. Everything that he's thinking about is how to get better about winning football games. And when he calls me, and sometimes he was like, he said he was calling him maybe hey, say take a day off or something. He was like, hey, why don't you get this ready or something? And then he said it again. He's like, this dude is straight up just about winning football games. Just remember that. He told me. And I was thinking, oh, okay. So you've heard some other people say that, but he's all about winning football games. That's what he's trying to do.
Danny, that goes for anybody in any profession, man. Singleness of purpose. The leader has got to be, driven. The assistants are going to follow the leader. The players are going to follow the assistants. So it all starts with the guy in charge, man.
Okay, Scar. So T. Martin, there were some names. Josh Henschke, I mentioned him. The main man, the Maize and Blue Review, the publisher yesterday, he threw out, along with Griese's name and along with T. Martin's name, a guy that he knows from Stanford, and Tavita Pritchard, who played there and then has coached there ever since. There is somebody else. What about somebody that wouldn't have any West Coast, or just has been out on the West Coast the whole time and doesn't have Midwest connections? I mean, like, he's not coming in as the head coach and maybe as a quarterback and an OC. Would that matter to you?
It has advantages. I mean, that guy will have connections on the West Coast. He'll know California, be able to help us recruit there. So, yeah, all three of those names Jim knows very well. So you don't. There's not no. He's got T. Martin work with his brother, and Tavita apparently worked with Jim way back in the day. So he knows him. He knows everything about him. There's no guessing. He don't have to look at a reference. He's not going on some other coach. So he's got guys he knows. He knows how hard they work. He knows how they communicate with kids. He knows how they coach. Because you got to, again, you got to have guys that can coach and teach and recruit. They got to do those things. So looks like some good options. How would they blend in with the staff? And it'd be interesting to see what Jim does. But I think that's one of many, many talents a great coach has to have is the ability to evaluate coaches. You get a position coach wrong. You get a guy that can't recruit, or he can just coach, or he's a recruiter, but there's players don't understand him. You're going to have problems. So you got to find the right guy that blends in and fits in with the whole program and can out coach. And I mean, Denny, look at we talk about recruiting or coaching. We haven't out recruited Ohio State. The teams that we win against these last couple of years, they had 4- and 5-star kids. Michigan had predominantly 3- and 4-star kids, and we beat them the last 2 years. So we didn't out recruit them. You got to be able to coach, scheme, and you got to out scheme them, and you got to out technique them, and out strength coach them, and all the little things that we've been able to do the last 2 years.
Jim Scarcelli, what about when Chris says he'd like to see Griese as the quarterback coach, wouldn't you assume that if Brian Griese, who's the quarterback coach for the San Francisco 49ers, if he came to Michigan, not only would he be the quarterback coach, he would also assume that role that Matt Weiss had, however it worked out with the dynamic of being a co-offensive coordinator. Same thing with T. Martin, same thing with Pritchard. I don't know if you look at that as a drawback or whatever, but don't you think those guys specifically, that if they're coming in, they're not coming in, I say, just as a quarterback coach. They're coming in as an OC too, where you mentioned Denard Robinson. Somebody mentioned Devin Gardner, who he's been doing TV, but he's also a pretty sharp guy. Those guys you could say could just be, put that quotes, a quarterback coach and recruiter. And then they do have somebody that is on staff that is an analyst, Campbell, that has, that people have talked about as well. And that's staying in-house and elevating somebody. And then you say you have him just, again, in quotes, as a quarterback coach. And then you can have Sharon Moore as your OC. What about those parts?
Denny, what's interesting is none of us know the exact chain of command in the collaboration, right? All we've been told by Coach Harbaugh is there's a collaboration, okay? And it was Weiss, Moore, Harbaugh. Who knows how much input he's taken from Michael Hart when it comes down to play calling? We don't know, or Bellamy this past year. It's a collaboration. So, and I totally understand that as a coach. My guys on offense collaborated, my two main guys on offense. So whoever this guy is, he'll be able to recruit very well. He'll be a great communicator and teacher of technique and skill, and he will understand his role as part of the collaboration. And maybe Sharon may have a bigger voice. Again, I've always said this is Jim Harbaugh's offense. This thing is modeled after his beliefs. And if we lost our whole staff tomorrow and we had 5 new offensive coaches, we'd be running the exact same offense the next day. So that's my beliefs about our offense.
Yeah, well, the offense was excellent last year. They don't have to mess around a lot. I mean, it's not broken at all. So, and you got a quarterback coming back. I mean, this is a great spot. Whoever comes in to keep it going. And that's one thing about Michigan right now in the offseason. I've been around talking about Michigan in the offseason for years, and you're always like, well, you'd really like them to see do that better, this better, that better. This team was undefeated last year. This team was, scoring a point a minute almost. I mean, they were fabulous. There's some things, of course, you could always look at and say you want to get better. But if they're running it back and the offense and defense is, statistically like it was last year, you're going to have a great year again next year. Let me ask you this question. If Harbaugh's sitting there and let's just say he's got a lot of great candidates, and he's just thinking it over, and he's sitting there at his desk, and he says, you know what, I really like this coach, really like that coach. But then he looks at the one, and he says, I think that Coach A is a better coach. I think he's going to do a better job coaching. But then he looks over at Coach B, and he's like, you know, I like him as a coach too, but I think he's going to be a better recruiter. That's Coach B. So, and everything's equal, but he feels like one's going to be a little bit better coach, one's going to be a little bit better recruiter. Scar, what does he do?
Well, that depends on what he's got around him. You know, if he listen, you got to do, really, there's a third, you know, listen, you want the guy that can recruit, you want the guy that can teach technique, proper, you know, all the footwork and all the little, but you also want a guy that can scheme. And that's different when you say, okay, how do we attack this Ohio State defense? How do we attack Michigan State defense? There's a difference in ability there, in my opinion, with coaches. You know, to find a way, and I thought we've done a real good job of that as a staff, out scheming people offensively. So, Denny, to answer your question, yeah, Jim has to look at all that. When I think about those three names, okay, you got Griese. Let's just take Griese, T. Martin. T. Martin has, I think if you just said, I think he would understand all of the techniques of what we ask our quarterback to do, probably better than Brian Griese, because I don't know how much Brian Griese, when he played, he didn't run the RPO stuff. Now, obviously, he's a smart kid. It's not brain surgery to figure out how to teach the RPO stuff, but he didn't do it as a player, and I don't know how much of those things they're doing with San Fran. But again, you can teach guys to do those things. So, you know, those are just little issues a coach has to look at. How much experience does he have teaching the stuff that we run?
Yeah, the other part with Griese is he might not be available for a couple more weeks now because he's going to be coaching in the NFC Championship game on Sunday. And if San Francisco wins that game, he'll be coaching in the Super Bowl.
You know, Danny, also, though, the fact that he played 10 years in the NFL and he was a quarterback on a national championship, Michigan team, all that stuff helps in recruiting. You go into that living room and you tell a parent, hey, listen, we want guys to get great educations and play pro football. So he's going to sell it because he did it, and he's selling Michigan and he lived it. So,
well, just think about Brock Purdy. He's won 8 games, 7 as a starter, and every time somebody talks about Brock Purdy, they keep saying, he's going to turn into a pumpkin, and he's not. And the spotlight gets so much bigger now. If the 49ers went out there and won the game on Sunday in Philadelphia, and Purdy, he hasn't turned the ball over very much, and he's been an effective. If he goes out there and gets to the Super Bowl and would say something like, Shanahan and Brian Griese, these guys have been such a big help. And then if he somehow won the Super Bowl, which isn't crazy, I think any of the 4 teams can win it. San Francisco can win the Super Bowl with Brock Purdy, and Brian Griese has that in his back pocket. That would be pretty good to.
I tell you, those are 2 really good offensive coaching staffs, and the guy at San Fran, I think he's a really good offensive coach. Tough to figure out. He does a good job. I'm impressed with him as an offensive scheme guy. He just gives you problems.
Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, I just think he's a good. He's been to this championship game now 3 of the last 4 years, I think, and a big part of it is scheme. He just gives people problems with what he does on offense, and I give the guy credit for that.
Yeah, he's one of the best. There's no doubt about that. Coming up, we're going to talk about a specific position group, the Michigan on the defensive side of the ball. The rush edge, which Michigan has Michigan is, I think, now known for when you look at the pipeline of the players that they're putting in the NFL. Let's answer a question. This one comes in from Antoine, who says Jim already knew some of the Stanford staff and has firsthand knowledge of them. Plus, they run a form of West Coast offense. Not to mention, he will help with West Coast quarterback recruiting. To Antoine's point here, when you're talking about Pritchard, T. Martin, he could call up John and say, what's he like? You know, what do we know about him? And then with Griese, what you see is what you get here with Griese, and that he's just talked with him after everything that happened here. Like all three of these guys, just those three, it might end up being somebody else. They're all pretty interesting and bring, different things to the table, but he's got a pretty good knowledge of all of them.
Yeah, and then again, it's just like any business, any profession, any of us are in. We want to dig in and get as many references as possible because big positions that we all hire in any line of work, man. You want to make sure you know everything about a guy because he can screw your whole program up. So I think Jim will do his homework. The guy will fit in. He'll be a team guy. He'll be smart. He'll be able to recruit. And Antoine likes the guy at Stanford. We'll see what he does. Yeah, he's not going to just be able to recruit quarterbacks. He's got to be able to recruit anybody on the West Coast. And Nick Sheridan is another name.
Michigan man.
His dad was a GA when I played. But yeah, Nick has done well. He's out at Washington now, and he was at Indiana. Kirk Campbell, I don't know who that is. Greg Roman. I thought Greg Roman too, because he worked with Jim.
No doubt.
But
work with Jim, work with John,
Yeah, and Devin. I don't know. Is Devin Gardner showing interest in wanting to get into college coaching? I don't know, but
that was if somebody just threw his name up there, and I like him. I don't hold there's people that are like, stop with the Michigan man. It's like, no, don't stop with the Michigan man. There's nothing wrong with being a Michigan man. Kirk Campbell is an analyst, a quarterback coach analyst who has been on, who's with Michigan now. And the thought is if they stayed in-house, they could bump him up to be the quarterback coach. Also, he could just stay as an analyst. So, if you like him, he could just stay right there. It would depend if Jim thought that, he was ready for that move. I think that if he talked to J.J. McCarthy and he's like, "You kidding me? This guy knows everything. Everything. He's the one, that was telling me it's Campbell. Like if I went to J.J. McCarthy and I'm sure Harbaugh at least had some conversations about it. Doesn't mean that he's going to go with the guy that McCarthy says, but if McCarthy said, you know what, Coach, Campbell's the one that was the key to everything against Ohio State. He was the one that told me to, take an extra drop or, look over, hit Kojo, whatever it is, whatever it would be. Let's run the ball more.
I don't know how much Jim will listen to, but you listen to some extent how players react. I mean, I used to tell my coaches, and I would watch how the reaction players have when they're in their presence. I want to see a coach who, when that guy's there, man, the players are just, they are sitting at attention and they are working harder or they are practicing harder. You feel the guy's presence. That's when you got a good assistant coach. There's other guys that they're just kind of around, man. And you don't feel the guy. The good coaches, you don't just hear them, you feel them because their presence makes everybody play and practice harder. And Jim understands that too. Who are those guys? You don't want the stiff that just kind of, Bo used to call it. I don't know if you've ever heard this term, Danny. I think it might be in his book. We heard it as players, but he said he didn't want coaches coaching with hands in pockets. And what he meant by coaching with your hands in your pockets, where you were just kind of at practice and just kind of chilling. He wanted coaches that were out there swinging and communicating and motivating. And that's what things I used to ask. My coaches all heard the same stuff from me. We're not coaching with hands in pockets. We are going to get in the face of our players every down.
Final one for me on this, Scar. Let's say that, again, everything's equal and Harbaugh's just sitting back saying, man, I got so many great choices here. I can't believe it. I got, 4 or 5 guys. I'm going to have a tough time. Who knows? Flip a coin, pull a name out of a hat. I love them all. But then he talks to Jaden Davis, the quarterback out of Providence Day. And they're just talking. Davis just said this week that he's in constant communication with Harbaugh. And what if the next conversation they have and, Harbaugh's just talking and Davis says, You know what? I grew up a huge fan of T. Martin, and I just love everything. I talked with him when he was at Tennessee. He talked about he's a mentor. I love everything about him. What about that, Scar? Do you think that could tip the scales for?
Yeah, Danny. Yeah, Jim is going to listen to all different factors of what the strengths are of every coach is going to have something. One guy can recruit the West coach. He understands the RPO game. He's done this. He fits in, or this guy, he's done this. He won a national. And Jim's got to balance them. All right, what does this guy bring? He's got this, and we all make those decisions in leadership. And
if T. Martin's bringing Jaden Davis with him, and all things are being equal, he might say,
yeah, you're right. It might be, it could close the deal. I mean, it won't be the first college coach of anything that got a job because of his ability to bring in one player. We've all heard that of different guys that got hired just because they could bring a kid in.
The Harbaugh brought somebody in already since he's been at Michigan. And wasn't he somebody on the staff and their kid was a DB or something? I don't remember exactly how that went down. I think it ended up not coming in. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It wouldn't be the first time, even with Jim Harbaugh, that he would make a hire with the idea of getting a recruit. So don't I'm glad, I thought you were going to brush that one aside, Scar, but no, you didn't. That's because you're thinking things through. All right. You've also have been thinking things through. The position that you played at Michigan was defensive end / outside linebacker. And those are the guys that we're going to talk about today, Scar, the defensive end / outside linebacker. Michigan's got a heck of a pipeline, however far you want to go back with Harbaugh from, let's count some of them here, and I might miss some. Uche, the red sleeve guy from the Patriots, he played at Michigan. He's been tremendous in the pros. How many sacks did he have this year?
Yeah.
Kwity Paye, Aiden Hutchinson, David Ajabo. I mean, it's a long list of guys that now Mike Morris is going to be a high pick in the NFL. That's a heck of a pipeline that you can for Michigan. And I'm going to put a depth chart out. I just want to tell everybody that I realized that Yabi Oki is in the transfer portal. So I'm going to have to draw a line through him. But Josiah Stewart, who is a transfer from Coastal Carolina, he's on the list along with Braden McGregor, Derek Moore. And then you have some depth guys that are listed, including some incoming freshmen. Tell me what you think about some of these guys.
Danny, here's how I see it. I actually think that this group, it might be better than this past year. There's you got McGregor, who is now going to be a 4th-year kid, and he has improved every year. He frustrated me early on, making so many mental mistakes and is not in position, not seeing things, but he's gotten smarter. He's a big, physical, tough kid. I think he's going to have a great year. He's a guy we got coming back. Harrell is another kid who can play the run and pass. So McGregor, they drop him occasionally. He's better versus the run, but if you're going to play that position, you got to drop. Otherwise, the defense knows. When McGregor's in the game, he's only rushing. When Stewart's in the game, he's the guy they drop with. Or Harrell's in the game. So you have to be able to do both. But I like those two. They've got a ton of experience. They can both play the run, and they can both drop in coverage enough. So I like both of them. And now we've got Derek Moore. Now will be a returning. He's a 4 or 5-star kid, and he played a lot as a true freshman. Derek Moore is going to have to get a little better with his pass drop, but he was good for a true freshman. He was good against the run. He's a guy that we'll see the most improvement from him of all of them, because that's when you see the most improvement, Denny, is from your freshman to your sophomore year. You get a spring football under your belt. Derek Moore will give us 3 really good run defenders. His pass drop ability will be average. But Stewart is a heck. I watched that kid at Coastal Carolina. He's going to be a little more undersized guy. He's not a 270-pound, 60-pound kid. He's a 235 guy, 6'2" maybe. He'll do a better job in pass dropping, but he does have the ability to come off the edge. We've got 4 guys there that can rush the quarterback, and with Stewart, and but what it does, Denny, is it forces the offensive tackle to, okay, now you got to block McGregor, and okay, now you got to be able to block Stewart. So you got 2 different types of athlete, you know what I mean? Or you got to block Moore, and now you got to block Harrell over here. And then the 5th guy, I think, they're going to try to work, they're going to try to continue to develop is TJ Guy. So those other people on those that I don't think are much of a factor on that list. I see these 5 guys as the top 5 going into spring football that I think their coaches are looking at. And I really like the top 4. TJ's got to get but again, he could have a big spring and really improve. And it'll just click for him. Because I remember my first 2 years, I was terrible. And that one spring, man, everything clicked. And a lot of these players are going to go through the same thing. Everything just starts to slow down. You understand your technique. But I really like this position group. Last year, I said our 2 interior guys were going to be the best in the Big Ten. We've got our linebacker group is going to be better. We'll talk about them next week. But our edge group, I honestly think this group could be a little bit better.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and it wouldn't surprise me that if Jalen Harrell, of all those guys that I were talking about, from Kwity Paye to Hutchinson, that he's the next in line, that he's the best out of this group, and he's right in there with those other guys. Whatever it needs to be from him, just more consistency with more reps or anything else, but, I'm sitting back and watching him. He's always on the screen. He's always jumping off the screen, making plays. He looks like a great football player to me, and you expect him just to get better. So I'm a big fan of Jalen Harrell coming off the edge.
I like that position group, and there's going to be good competition there. We've got depth. Denny, did you want to talk coaching or recruiting real quick? I know you talked about it the other day. This is the thing I think people have to understand when you talk about, recruiting versus coaching. Wisconsin won a lot of games, Danny, in the last 25 years or so, and they never won recruiting battles, but they recruited guys that fit their mode, their model of what they did. They weren't recruiting. Ohio State might have they're going to get the great 4 or 5-star offensive tackle, but he's only going to be there for 3 years. Wisconsin's going to get guys that might not, might be 2 and 3-star type guys, but they're going to be there for 4 and 5 years. So anyway, that's just something I think that people don't always look at when you talk about recruiting and is it always just about having the higher rated kid compared to the guy that could keep the guys there for 4 and 5 years. But, I just think you have to be able to do both. I talked about that. I remember Bill McCartney. He was a guy that, when I had 1 year with him when he was at Michigan, but I could see, and it didn't surprise me at all when I saw him succeed at Colorado, because he recruited me a little bit, so I knew he could talk and communicate. I saw that firsthand, but then I watched him as a coach, and this guy can coach. He's smart. He knows scheme. He knows how to motivate, and he could do all of that. But anyway, you got to be able to do both. And we've just beaten, we've beaten Ohio State, like I said, the last 2 years, and with 3 and 4-star kids, you'd have to say that it's a big part of it is scheme and how we teach. We're out teaching them, we're out scheming them, and I just wanted to touch on it. You covered it, but go ahead on to your next topic, then, unless you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I want to comment on it. You think of Wisconsin with, that started with Barry Alvarez and, just getting the big offensive lineman up front. And then the way they were able to put those guys into the draft. If you were a great offensive lineman, Wisconsin was offensive line you. But just thinking about where Michigan's at right now and how they've done this and how they've, whether you want to say turned it around or where they're at right now, it is a great spot. We just talked about one of the position. We just mentioned all the different players that have gone in the draft and how they look next year. If I'm an outside linebacker, if I'm a defensive end, I want to go to Michigan. That's why it was crazy that, you think about it in the sense that Yabi Obi or Oki would fly the coop, because it's this is the spot that you want to be.
Danny, though, those, who knows what kind of conversation he had, just like Upshaw. Upshaw left, Okie left. For all we know, Mike Elston might have sat those guys down and said, listen, we see McGregor in front of you. We see Harrell in front of you, So, maybe they were just being honest with them. And they said, that's how we're going to go into the spring. And they said, okay, I could totally understand where, Okie might not beat out and play in front of those guys. I watched them play all year, and I don't just, like I said, I'm being honest. I don't have any hurt feelings that he's gone. Put it that way, with the 5 guys we got coming back.
Well, on the other side is the offensive line. If there was one part, people said, how's Michigan? How did Harbaugh do it? But what's the biggest key? I always looking for that biggest key. I would say it was the offensive line. Now, you can always get away with saying it's line play, so you can go to both sides. But if you're looking specifically, which unit? I always thought it would be the quarterback specifically that was going to be the difference. And I think the quarterback was the difference this year. But the way the offensive line has played the last 2 years, that's the unit that I would go with on why Michigan has been able to turn this thing around and get it going in the direction that they want.
Yeah, Danny, I believe though that the biggest reasons we've won championships the last year is I believe it's scheme, overall scheme on all phases of the game. Defensive scheme. If Jim doesn't hire Mike McDonald, he's gone. The scheme defensively, and then what we do on offense schematically, we run so much different stuff. We force people to play, in a phone booth at times that they don't like to play. So we force them to play physical football that they don't play against other teams. So I think our scheme, our coaches coach right. We're smart coaches. We got good players, but it's an overall. I wouldn't put it on one group, Denny. I just can't do it. I'm not going to put.
I would, but if I pin you down on a specific unit, like you had to, like I
can't do it. I can't do it because they're part. The offensive line they're part of what we do on offense. It's the scheme. We've got tight ends, we got running backs, receivers, and court. It's overall, man. I'm just talking like a former coach now. I know it. I get it. Because I understand that you have to have all of it. You just can't have, your offensive line isn't any good if the defense knows what the hell you're running all the time, or you don't put them in enough conflict. Offensive lines are only as good as the kind of conflict you put the defense in. If the guy knows what the hell blocks you're going to do all the time, it makes it easy to defend you.
I'm just going to leave it with Michael on the feedback. It's not a comeback. It's just I'm going to leave it right here. This discussion. Michael says you get things going.
I hear you, man. You got to be.
And the big uglies. There it is. All right. Well, we've seemed to have covered everything. Is there something going on here with Michigan football? As I look outside and I see, it looks like a blizzard here. Scar's already got his workout in. What else when it comes to Michigan football, Scar, on this Wednesday?
No, I know that wearing those rings on these recruiting trips, these players are coming in, and Jim he's got a big old ring from last year. I don't know that the new ones came yet. I know it mattered to me when Coach Schembechler pulled out that tray of rings. He's like, you go up the road over there in Lansing, you're not getting one of these.
No, you're right, Scar. I can tell you there was
it matters. And Danny, I got a comment real quick. We had a call in last week when I was on, and I mentioned how I like quarterbacks that can move, and I think the days of the statue are over. One of our callers, smart guy, said, "Yeah, but how many Super Bowls have won? A lot of slow guys have won a lot of Super Bowls, And I guess what I would say to that question is I don't think Tom Brady won those Super Bowls. I think the New England Patriots won the Super Bowls. Same thing about, I don't think J.J. McCarthy won our Big Ten championship. I think, the Jim Harbaugh led Michigan Wolverines. If you look though, the trend though, I think if you look at, I was looking at the final 8 teams in the NFL playoffs, all of them had guys that I would say they can move. I consider Joe Burrow a guy that can move. Aaron Rodgers is a guy that can move. And obviously Mahomes can move. I think that's the trend. You're going to see more and more of that because that's what the colleges are all they're gearing it up more toward in their recruiting. They all want a guy that can move a little more. So I understand your. I just wanted to defend my argument that it isn't about Tom Brady. It's about the New England Patriots, and it's not. But the guy that can move is still, I think, a more difficult to defend.
The thing I like about J.J. McCarthy, there's a lot of things that I like right now, but when I look to the games on Sunday and the quarterbacks that you just mentioned, J.J. McCarthy plays a game a lot like Patrick Mahomes, a lot like Joe Burrow, a lot like Jalen Hurts, not really like Brock Purdy, but those other three guys, that's the kind of game that J.J. McCarthy plays. So Michigan fans, like a lot of off seasons, it's like, man, we need a quarterback like that. Michigan has a quarterback like that. One other thing, Scar, it just reminded me back in the day back in my college days, I had a friend. He was actually a friend of a friend, but we would go out to the bars, and I remember standing in line one time, and he was just talking about, I usually just go to the front of the line. That's what he said. He was a cocky guy. We all liked him, but he was great. And we would say, how did you go to the front of the line? And he'd always just point, and he had a Big Ten championship ring. And he said, I just show him this. And then we were always, whoa, you just shot. And it was funny because we always would just say, hey, show him your ring. That ring gets you a lot of places, Scar.
Yeah, Denny, I talked to some of my buddies that when we played, and we're talking, comparing what we got in our day compared to what these guys with the NIL, all the money they're getting. Yeah, that was about the extent of our perks. Yeah, you might get in free cover over at Rick's bar, or maybe after a big win, the owner might send you a picture or something. But yeah, that was about the extent of our NIL perks.
You'd have a car now, Scar.
Oh yeah, these guys. Hey, they deserve it, man. I'm happy for them. I like it. So it is what it is.
I agree. I won't be sending you a car, but the one day.
Hey, if anybody wants me to look, I had trouble finding Denny. I had trouble finding more training film. I was able to get that one last couple of weeks ago with Sharon Moore, but I could put on some film and analyze maybe a little more in depth a couple games if people are interested in that. If you're interested in that, I could put on like a Penn State and maybe slowly analyze maybe the position group that I'm going to cover on that day. I don't know if that's of interest. If you think that's something you want to hear, maybe 8-10 minutes of that, let us know.
What's of interest to me, and we'll have to work on it, and it'll have to be maybe in the spring or summer, is getting that old projector film going. And I can sit in a room with you, and I don't know, I don't smoke cigars, but I might, just for the effect, and have that old projector going and have you sit over there and you start pointing things out on the screen. I'll blow some of that smoke and we'll have the old projector going. That's what I want to see.
Danny, that's one of the things I miss in coaching more than anything, is to be able to have that film running. I have my players in front of me, and I got that red laser beam, and we're just talking and going over stuff and getting after players and loving them up, and sometimes getting in their face hard. So that's coaching, though, man. Our coaches did it to us, and you got to be mentally tough to take the kind of coaching we got and the kind of coaching I gave too. So
it's kind of like
Coach Mo used to always say, "Hey, look, man, if you're going to go out there in front of 100,000 people, you better be able to handle some. You better be mentally tough. So if you can't handle a tough conversation here in the film room, you're not going to be able to handle 100,000 on national television." So.
And I don't know how the educators do it now. I don't think, maybe some of them still do have a chalkboard, but they always used to play that commercial. They would show Vince Lombardi, and he was like, you get a seal here and you get a seal there, and he'd have the chalkboard, so.
That's coaching.
The chalkboard. All right, Scar, great job. Can't wait to talk with you next week.
All right, Denny, have a great week. Go Blue.